Hey there, welcome to episode 63 of Mike's Collection. In this episode, the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about is the newest wave of SpiderMan Marvel Legends, and this is the Demogoblin Build-A-Figure wave. This wave just started hitting stores the last week of December, in some places, first week of January. I got this new Spider-Man wave about a week, 2 weeks ago, the same week that I got the new Fantastic Four wave. So that was an expensive week. But I did pick up both complete waves, and I'm going to cover both of them for you. I hope to do back-to-back episodes. So this episode will focus just on the Spider-Man wave, but if you're interested in the Fantastic Four wave as well, check out my following video. So I won't waste too much time here. Let's dive right into it. This is Velocity Suit Spider-Man in the packaging, from behind, and some artwork on the side. So here is the Spider-Man Velocity Suit outside of the packaging. So bring it up close here so you can see the details, because there is some sculpted detail here that just isn't painted, so you might not spot that at first. But otherwise, it's basically an armored version of the basic Spider-Man costume. And like with all Marvel Legends, I won't go into the articulation and stuff for each one of these figures, because you know what to expect with these things. Double jointed elbows, double jointed knees. You know, you can get these guys in lots of position. He's got good posability, so that's not an issue. The sculpting's great, the paint's great. It's hard to criticize Marvel Legends these days, because Hasbro's doing a really bang-up job with these figures, and this is another good one. Now, I'll be honest, I probably would not have bought this figure if I wasn't looking to finish the Build-A-Figure, because I'm not really familiar with it. This look, you probably noticed on the box, it's got that kind of unique box in that it's white, as opposed to most Marvel Legends, which are in black packaging. And they use the white there to signify that it's part of the Gamerverse. So that's based on the Spider-Man video game, available on PS4 and I think on the Xbox One and all that stuff. Anyway, and the look of this costume with the white spider, I think this suit is basically supposed to be an armored version of this standard suit that video game Spider-Man wears in that game. So you see this suit is just a slight variation of the regular Spider-Man outfit. Rather than having a little black spider on the front, he's got this big white spider, and he's got some various white accents throughout. So when they decided to armor him up, I think they basically just took that same suit and made it a little more metallic. Now, so this suit is based on the video game, not based on the comic books. And I'm a big comic reader, but I don't play much in the way of video games. But they actually did do a mini-series called Spider-Man Velocity, which I didn't buy because it was in the continuity of the video game, not in regular Spider-Man continuity. But they did devote a whole mini-series to the creation of this costume. So I'm guessing it's one of the main costumes from the video game. And so, yeah, there's probably a lot of people that don't read comic books that mostly know Spider-Man from the movie and video games that might really be into this figure. Personally, it doesn't do a whole lot for me. I think it's a nice figure, but I much prefer more classic Spider-Man. And so, yeah, it's not bad. Now, as far as accessories go, he didn't come with much. Some people might be bothered by the fact that he only has the hands that he comes with, which might seem like kind of a weird thing to say. But we've been kind of spoiled lately because Marvel Legends has been providing with lots of alternate hands, especially when you've got somebody like Spider-Man who's got the the web spinning hand, and you know you want him to have fists, and sometimes you give him open hands. So yeah, it's nice when you have a variety. But yeah, this guy only has these two hands, so one fist, one web spinning hand. And the web spinning hand is appropriate because the only accessory he came with, other than the Build-A-Figure piece, is this kind of weird web piece. And so what this is intended to be is if he's, shot his web at a villain or something, and they could get all tangled up in the web like so. And so it's kind of it's different because we've got a few web lines in the past. So if you have the web line accessory from one of the previous figures, you could attach that right to his wrist and attach it to this, and you've got a nice little diorama of him webbing somebody up. So yeah, I think it's kind of a neat accessory. Not one I have a whole lot of use for. It's going to go right into my kind of spare parts junk bin, but still kind of neat. So that's Velocity Suit Spider-Man. If you're a fan of the video game, you might appreciate this more than I do. For me, it's only okay. Like I said, I only got it really so I could get the Build-A-Figure piece. But it's not a bad figure either. I don't mind having it. And especially since they introduced the concept of the Spider-Verse into the comic books, where Spider-Man can travel to different realities in the multiverse and hang out with different versions of Spider-Man. It kind of creates... All these characters seem to be like unique characters now, so I don't feel like I just have 1,000 different Spider-Mans on my shelf. They're all different Spider-Mans from different universes, and you can actually play with them together. This Spider-Man, the video game Spider-Man, he actually did cross paths with the other Spider-Mans in the last Spider-Verse crossover. Now I know these two are technically supposed to be the same guy, but, you know, if you were playing with your toys and you want to do Spider-Verse, you could make these two different guys from two different multiverses, and there you go. Brand new character. So, not bad. This is the SpiderMan Armor MK3 in the packaging. From behind and on the side. And here is Spider-Man outside of the packaging. Now, the packaging reads that this is the MK3 Armor. I think I just called it the MK3 Armor. I don't know how you say it. I think in the Iron Man movies, what do they call them? Mark III? I don't know. So, Mark III Armor, MK3 Armor, MK3 Armor, whatever you want to call it. This is another version of Spider-Man. And it's I feel about the same of this one as I do with the last one. It's not essential to your collection. If you were only going to have one Spider-Man figure, I don't think you'd want it to be this one. But at the same time, it's cool. Like, I like the way it looks. But yeah, if it wasn't, you know, if it didn't come with one of the Build-A-Figure pieces, I don't think I would really need it in my collection. You know, articulation. I know I just said I wasn't going to talk about this with every figure, but I'll show you just again quickly. Double jointed knees, double jointed elbows, lots of poses, you know. So he's all good there. He's a fun toy to play with. The paint and the sculpting, everything is great. He's got you know, the paint job gives him again kind of a metallic sheen, which is appropriate since this is supposed to be an armored costume. And this one here actually does originate from the comic books as opposed to the video game. This was introduced a couple of years ago during a storyline called Ends of the Earth, where Spider-Man was battling Dr. Octopus, who was trying to, I don't know, make the sun go supernova or something. Some big grand plan. And I read the series. I thought it was okay. I don't really remember why Spider-Man felt he had to get a new set of armor to fight Dr. Octopus. I can't remember the rationale behind it. And I suppose I could have Googled it before shooting this video, but I don't think it really matters. Every now and again, Spider-Man dons a new suit for various reasons, especially when it comes to action figures, because it allows the toy companies to make more money. Like the first Spider Armor that I really recall that was introduced back in the 90s was introduced in, I think it was issue 100 of Web of Spider-Man, and it was the black and silver armor. And here is a figure from Toy Biz. Now this is my favorite Spider Armor, just because it's the first Spider Armor, and I kind of have nostalgic ties to it from my childhood. But honestly, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense either. I can't remember why he wore this. It might have been to fight Electro or somebody. But yeah, so I like this figure. I'd like to see this one made in the Marvel Legends style. But yeah, on its own merits, this is a decent figure. It kind of reminds me of another armored Spider-Man I had from the 90s in Toy Biz, because they did produce a whole lot of different Spider-Man in all kinds of wacky outfits. They had him in Electro fighting outfits and Morbius fighting outfits. Kind of an outfit for every villain. This one here, I don't know if it was specific for a specific villain, but it came out in the same wave as Beetle and Swarm as far as the villains were going. I can't remember the thought process of putting him in this armor, but I always kind of like the look of it. So, you know, I don't mind getting a weird random armored Spider-Man from time to time. So this one here, I don't mind it. I think it looks cool, but it's probably not essential to anyone's collection unless you were a huge fan of that Ends of the Earth storyline. Now, like the Gamerverse Spider-Man there, the Velocity suit, this guy did not come with any extra hands. and the only accessory he came with was a piece of webbing. And his is almost even weirder than Velocity Suit's. It's just this piece here. Now, it might seem like kind of an odd little piece to even bother making as an accessory, but it is kind of neat because Spider-Man often webs up somebody's face if they're talking trash to him. You just shoot some webbing over their mouth. And that's basically what this is. This is just some webbing that you can put over somebody's face. And it's pretty effective accessory. So yeah, kind of cool. I like it. Again, it's probably just going to go in my junk bin, but still. It'd be fun if you were a kid and you played with this stuff. I'd probably get a lot more use out of it. So yeah, I don't have a whole lot more to say about Mark III Spider-Man here. But yeah, he's not bad. Here's Superior Spider-Man from the front, from the back, and from the side. And here he is outside of the packaging. Now, I know I just misspoke a second ago and called this guy Superior Spider-Man. That's not quite accurate. This is Superior Octopus, but it's an easy mistake to make. And if you're familiar with the character, you would understand why. But basically, in that Ends of the Earth storyline that I just talked about, it was revealed that Dr. Octopus was dying, and he had gone from his classic chubby Dr. Octopus mode, which here's the Marvel legend of kind of classic Dr. Octopus. So this is how we're used to seeing him with those glasses, and he's kind of pudgy and the big tentacles there. So he had gone from that to walking around in like a metallic cocoon because he was dying and his body was given out. And that's partly what set him off to do this crazy plan with the sun or whatever. So Dr. Octopus was on his deathbed, and that plan didn't work out in Ends of the Earth. However, Dr. Octopus's next big plan when he showed up again was to actually swap his mind with Peter Parker's mind so he could take over Spider-Man's young, healthy body. And he actually succeeded in doing that. And he transplanted Peter Parker into his dying body, and then he died. And Peter Parker was dead. Nobody realized it, but Dr. Octopus had taken over Spider-Man's body, and he then decided to continue on being Spider-Man, but he said he was going to become an even better Spider-Man than Peter Parker ever could have been, and he was going to be the superior Spider-Man. And he took on this outfit. This is a figure of Doc Ock as the superior Spider-Man. So you can see it's black instead of blue. It's just like a little darker edge. The eyes on the masks are a little creepier. He had kind of claws on his hands. I don't know if they really captured that here. But yeah, he was kind of a creepier version of Spider-Man. But it was a really good storyline. I know it sounds a little out there, but it was actually really good. And it kind of made me like Doc Ock. And he's never been a favorite character of mine. Like look at him. He's not exactly the coolest looking guy. He's a classic villain, so I like him because he's a classic. But he's never been anybody that I've really rooted for. And I really came to like him in the Superior Spider-Man comic books. Now, of course, anytime something crazy like that happens in comic books, it's bound to get reversed. And Peter Parker's memories eventually fought their way back and took over his body again, and they booted Dr. Octopus out. And then Dr. Octopus, he transferred his mind into a clone of Peter Parker's body, and that's when he became the Superior Octopus. And he went back to his evil ways, but that was very short-lived. He was really only the Superior Octopus for one storyline or so, like maybe a year in the comic books. And then Spider-Man actually granted him permission to become the Superior Spider-Man again, because Dr. Octopus had kind of become reformed during his time as the Superior Spider-Man, and he tried to go back to being a villain. It didn't really pan out. So yeah, he became Superior Spider-Man again, even though the regular Spider-Man was still swinging around, and they kind of became like teammates, so to speak. So yeah, kind of weird. But anyway, let's get these guys out of here for now, and we'll talk about this figure. Right, so here is the Superior Octopus. So even though this was a relatively short-lived look, it is pretty cool. Like, I'm glad he didn't stay this way because it is a little too derivative of Spider-Man. I don't want every villain to just look like Spider-Man. Now, I'll get into this earlier than I expected. I was going to start talking about the problems with this figure, and the only real problem I have is these tentacles. Like, you plug them in here. They were all loose in the packaging, and you stick them in here. Now, I think you can plug them in anywhere. There's been other figures like this where you had to be really specific about which spot you stuck the tentacles. Here you don't. All four of them can be plugged into any hole. but they're all pre-posed, so they're not bendy wires. You can't really change the shape of them. And, you know, he's kind of hard to put on your toy shelf for display because he's got all these arms getting in the way. When he eventually does go in my toy display, I might even have to take his tentacles off just because my shelves are a little too crowded to put up with this kind of nonsense. So I don't know why Hasbro doesn't give us bendy wires, because if you could fold them all in around them like this, you know, that would be kind of cool. But instead you're kind of stuck with them as they are, and they kind of fall out relatively easily. And yeah, if you were a kid wanting to play with this thing, it doesn't make it easy to grab and wrap around Spider-Man because they're not bendy. Now mind you, they are soft rubber, so you can, you know, twist them around for a little while you're playing with them, but then they do revert back to their original shape. So I guess it's better than being hard, static plastic, but yeah, I do wish they had wires in them. Now otherwise, there's not much to say about the look. The figure, I doubt this is a new body. Hasbro reuses the same bodies a lot of times, and this is kind of a standard middle-sized muscular guy, so I'm sure it's been used before, probably even on other Spider-Man figures. And you know, it's a good body, good sculpting, good articulation, yada yada yada. Now the look here, this really does capture the look of Superior Octopus. He's got that cool octopus logo on the front, which is also reminiscent of the Hydra logo, and that's because Superior Octopus was a member of Hydra. Now it didn't work out for him, and I think it's partly what prompted him to go back to his heroic ways. But yeah, for the short while that he was wearing this costume, he was affiliated with Hydra. So he's got those Hydra colors. Now the mask is really cool, but it's very Spider-Man-esque, but also kind of reminiscent of Dr. Octopus's, you know, glasses that he always wore. So he's got these lenses here. And yeah, overall, a pretty cool figure. I like it quite a bit. I don't think it was, again, essential to anybody's collection because it was such a short-lived look. And, you know, we've got the classic Doc Ock, which is what most people would probably prefer. And even if you really liked the Superior storyline, you know, we previously got the Superior Spider-Man look, which he wore for much longer than this. So it is cool. I sometimes like when they make these costumes that were just for a very specific short-lived time. And so I do like this toy. And yeah, so if you dig it, go pick it up. Here is the Vulture from the front, from the back, and from the side. Now here is the Vulture outside of the packaging. So the Vulture, like Dr. Octopus, is another one of those classic Spider-Man characters that first appeared during the original run that was written by Stan Lee and drawn by Steve Ditko. You kind of have to love all of these characters. They are, you know, part of what makes Spidey. Now, as much as I was not really a fan of Dr. Octopus, I was kind of even less a fan of the Vulture. Like, I like the idea of a winged villain for Spider-Man, but he was never my favorite. And whose favorite would he be? Like, look at him. This guy is an old man. He was an old man from when he first appeared in the 60s, and he's still an old man now. Like, he's got like liver spots on his head and everything, which again, I think this is a great figure. It looks like how Vulture should look, but he's just not a very cool looking character. So he's a character you need, but yeah, I don't necessarily love the character. I never really have. They've made Vulture figures in the past to varying degrees of success. I haven't always bought the Vulture figures when they've been available, partly because I was never a big fan of the character. When I was buying a lot of Marvel toys in the 90s from Toy Biz, and they were based on the 90s cartoons, so there was the X-Men cartoon and the Spider-Man cartoon. There was also some short-lived Fantastic Four and Iron Man and stuff. But Spider-Man and X-Men were the big cartoons, and most of the toys were based on those. And even though Vulture did appear in that series as the old man, they did do a storyline that was directly from the comic books where Vulture got a hold of some harness or something that allowed him to steal the youth out of another person. And so they did an episode where Vulture stole Spider-Man's youth, became young, and that's what they decided to make a figure of. And I actually bought that figure because I thought young Vulture was actually a cooler looking Vulture. You see here he's all armored up. He's got a full head of hair. He's got these just overall a cooler looking costume. The only thing I didn't particularly like about young Vulture's costume was this big open neck. I don't know. I don't like V-neck t-shirts, and I don't like V-neck supervillain costumes. It just it didn't look very cool. Anyway, this look, I would have been happy if the Vulture had managed to stay young in the comic books, but he didn't. This only lasted for one storyline, which lasted a couple issues in the comic books, and it only lasted for, I think, one episode of the cartoon. So it is kind of funny that they chose to make this the version of the Vulture instead of the kind of standard old man. So here we go. Now we've got our old man Vulture. They've tried to make him cooler a couple of times in the comic books. For example, at one point, somebody else stole Vulture's costume. This is, again, very early in the Spider-Man comic books. And there was a guy named Blackie Drago who took over as the Vulture. And he basically wore the same costume, except he wore a helmet. And so what's cool is this figure, as one of its extra parts, came with an additional head, which is the Blackie Drago masked head. Let me just pop this off here. Now, the interesting thing about this is Blackie Drago was a much younger guy than Adrian Toomes, who is the classic old Vulture there. But this head, even though it's got the Blackie Drago helmet, it appears to be Adrian Toomes wearing it. It's still kind of got the old look. He's got that kind of pink paint around the eyes, which is exactly what you see on this head here. So yeah, it looks like it's actually supposed to be the same guy. Now, I do prefer this head. I think it looks a lot cooler. But when I display this guy, I'm probably going to go with the bald head just because that's the classic Vulture. But yeah, I really appreciate that Hasbro included this additional head. Now, another Vulture figure that I have, before I get into Marvel Legends, I was collecting the 3 3/4 inch Vulture figures, or Marvel figures, and I have this Vulture from the 3 3/4 inch line. And it's not bad. It's got a pretty good head sculpt on there. The only thing that's really missing is Vulture was always drawn with lines on his costume, which this one has. So you can see there on the front there's some lines. Although typically I think it's drawn all the way through. I'm just noticing that the lines don't go all the way through this costume here. It's just kind of in certain spots. But yeah, this smaller Vulture doesn't have any of that. But one thing I really didn't like about this figure is the way they constructed his wings. So this looks okay because he's kind of in flight. But when you start moving him around, then they look really stupid like that. Like Vulture would never stand like that in the comic book. They would kind of fold up behind him. And they didn't seem to figure out how to do that. And the way they stayed on was just this little peg that went into a hole in his arm. And it was just really frustrating because it doesn't stay in there very good. When you move him around, it was constantly falling out. I couldn't even find the other one when I dug him out for this video. But this always really bothered me because when I displayed these figures just standing up, Vulture looked really silly with his wings like that. You almost had to display him kind of with his arms up like this just so the wings didn't look ridiculous. Anyway, not a big fan. The figure itself is nice, but the wings just poorly constructed. Now, if we go back to Marvel Legends, while I do prefer my characters to look like their classic movie versions, I don't necessarily collect the MCU cinematic versions, but the Vulture was one of those characters that I thought they made a lot cooler in the movies than he ever was in the comic books. And they did put out a Marvel Legends based on the movie Vulture a while back. And here's him. And he's got this very impressive wing contraption. The wings were actually the Build-A-Figure of that particular wave. So every time you bought a figure, you got one of these components of the wings. And yeah, so they've got lots of posability on them. I can't even fit them all on screen here, but they're very cool. And I really do dig this look. So he's got the kind of flight helmet, which has kind of a bird-like look to it. And the way he's got the kind of bomber jacket with the furry collar, it kind of mimics the way the Vulture's costume looked with the furry collar there. I like the addition of these metal boots. This was a really cool Vulture figure. I think this is probably the coolest the Vulture has ever looked. But I still wanted a classic version anyway, even though I thought this one was better. I don't really like mixing my movie figures with my comic figures. I needed a comic book Vulture. So we finally got one. And he looks good. Like I said, Vulture's kind of an old man. It's not easy to get excited about an old man action figure. But this is a great Vulture figure. Except, I was really hoping they'd kind of come up with a wing concept a little closer to what we saw there on the movie Michael Keaton Vulture. But instead, what they've given us here is the exact same thing they did on the little mini 3 3/4 inch figure. It's just the wings are just plugged into there with these little pegs, which these ones seem to hold better than the smaller one, but it definitely hinders his posing. If you were to try and play with this guy, it doesn't make it easy to get his arms in multiple positions with these wings on. Oh, see, pieces are flying off in there. It's actually, there's 2 pieces for each arm. And the little ones, again, they just plug into the back there. And I find them kind of awkward. So, like, yeah, if you want to straighten this arm out, it doesn't look too bad. But I wish they'd come up with a better functionality for these wings. I'm not loving the way these wings look and how they function. I don't know a better way to do it, but I've seen better wings on other characters. For example, the movie Vulture. Now, that might have not been completely accurate to how he looks in the comic books, but I just think it would look and play better. So, anyway, I do think everybody that's a Spider-Man collector should get this Vulture figure. I think it's the nicest looking classic Vulture we've ever gotten, but it's not perfect. It still has some flaws. There you go. There's the Vulture. Here's ShangChi from the front, from the back, and from the side. So here we have ShangChi, also known as the Master of Kung Fu, outside of the packaging. So ShangChi is a martial arts character created by Marvel in the 70s. And yeah, he's still around today. And there's supposed to be a live action movie of him coming out, I think in 2021. So his popularity will probably spike significantly. He was quite popular in the 70s. His comic book ran for over 100 issues, which is a pretty good accomplishment for kind of a B character like this. It's kind of odd that they stuck him in this Spider-Man wave, because his connections with Spider-Man is pretty minimal. They haven't interacted too often. But whatever it takes to get him in here. Like, I'm happy that we finally have a figure of Shang-Chi. I think this may be the first one we've ever gotten, actually. And it's pretty great. Like the sculpting on him is excellent. The way the bare torso looks really good. The head sculpt is, I'd say, the best part about this thing. It looks really good. I love that bandana, the way the two tassels kind of are blown in the wind there. It looks really cool. Sometimes they screw up bare feet when it comes to these action figures, but I think Shang-Chi's look pretty good. He doesn't have like giant cankles or anything like that. And yeah, it's just a great figure. This is definitely one of the best figures from this wave, I would say. And even if you weren't necessarily a major Shang-Chi fan, this figure would be just a great, kung fu action figure. It kind of works as a good Liu Kang from Mortal Kombat. It's just pretty awesome. Now, as far as accessories go, you see there I've got him holding one of his nunchucks. The nunchucks could be a little better because you'll see here it's sculpted. It's kind of soft plastic, so you can bend it a little bit. I don't want to snap it though because it's not that soft. So it's kind of static looking for a nunchuck. And then he does have another nunchuck as well, which is kind of in this kind of folded position or whatever. So you could get a couple more poses of that, but again, that's pretty stiff. What is pretty cool about him for accessories, where Hasbro did not provide the Spider-Mans in this wave with any extra hands. It seems the extra hand budget was all spent on Shang-Chi, because here is all his extra hands. He has a total of 10 hands. So you can do 5 sets of closed fist, open hands, karate chop, the punch, gripping hand. So he's got, you can do, you know, all those, a variety of the two. Here's kind of a clutching hand. Yeah, it's pretty cool to get this many options with him. So that's pretty great. And yeah, I don't really have any complaints about this figure. I think it's awesome. I like this look for Shang-Chi. I usually associate him more with him wearing his shirt as well. I'm glad they didn't go with a more modern version, because nowadays he tends to wear just like a full red bodysuit, kind of more like Bruce Lee's famous like yellow outfit. I'm glad they didn't go that route. This one looks pretty good. The pants, those are kind of the classic pants he's always worn. It would have been nice maybe if there was a removable jacket option, but I'm not too concerned about it because this is looks pretty nice just as is. So yeah, I don't know a whole lot more to say about Shang-Chi, but yeah, it's an excellent figure. And here's White Rabbit from the front, from the back, and from the side. And here we have the White Rabbit outside of the packaging. Now the White Rabbit is a Spidey villain. I wouldn't go so far as to call her classic, but she has been around since 1983 when she first appeared in Marvel Team Up. And she has popped up pretty regularly ever since, including very recent issues of Amazing Spider-Man. She's working with a whole team of women supervillains. And yeah, it's nice that this character is still around and still prominent after all these years. She's the kind of character that almost always pops up when they have to show a big crowd of supervillains gathering for some reason. She's just always there. And while she is considered probably by most to be a C-list, D-list villain of Spider-Man, she's always felt more like prominent to Spider-Man to me because I had that first appearance of hers in Marvel Team Up probably very early on in my comic collecting history. Like I started collecting Spider-Man comic books in 1986, and her first appearance was 1983. But that first appearance in Marvel Team Up was one of the first books I bought. I had it probably within the first year of me collecting comic books, and so yeah, she's always kind of seemed like a kind of more of a classic Spidey villain to me than she might to most. And yeah, I'm really happy that we finally have a figure of her. She's just a wild looking character, and she's a lot of fun. And I think fans have been clamoring for her for quite some time. There's like an unofficial Marvel Legends voting poll every year. They've been doing that for years and years and years. And White Rabbit always ranks really high. Fans want to see her made. And yeah, we finally have her here at the beginning of 2020. And yeah, they've done a really good job. This is pretty much exactly what I would want out of a White Rabbit figure. I can't think of any changes they could have made. You'll see here she's got her kind of White Rabbit from Lewis Carroll inspired outfit. The rabbit ears, the rabbit makeup. She's got her little timepiece there. Fur boots. And then she's got her umbrella weapon, which shoots, I think it shoots carrots, actually. And yeah, what more do you really need from a White Rabbit figure? It's got great articulation, great sculpting, great paint, and yeah, it's just a character that's been in demand for a long time, and this is the first figure of her that we've ever gotten. So yeah, if you're a White Rabbit fan, this is a must-have. Now lastly, let's take a look at the Build-A-Figure from this wave. So this is Demogoblin, complete with Goblin glider and display base. So you see here you got this clear stand, which just plugs into the bottom of the glider there. And it's got some wiggle room, so you can kind of aim it upwards, downwards. And yeah, it's pretty nice. So you can kind of hover over the rest of the figures on your shelf. And for his glider, as opposed to the other goblins, Green Goblin, Hobgoblin, instead of a mechanical glider, he's got a glider made purely out of hellfire. And so they captured that by making this out of completely translucent plastic. So it's orange and yellow translucent plastic. You can kind of see through it there. Light kind of shines through it. It's pretty cool. But let's pop Demogoblin off of that so we can take a closer look at him. So here is Demogoblin off of the glider. And he's pretty great. As far as sculpting goes, the face has a ton of nice detail there. You can see all those crazy teeth. The tongue protruding there. I like the way his cowl is all torn here and tattered. He's got the kind of scaly arms, which is probably a reuse of parts from the Hobgoblin and Black Knight figures, who also had that kind of chainmail look. But his gloves would be all new with the, again, the tattered gloves, the claws kind of breaking through there, the chains wrapped around. This piece here is new with the kind of the demon head on his belt buckle. The boots, some of these parts might be reused from the other goblins as well, but the cape piece here, this tattered cape, that's all new. And yeah, it all comes together and creates a really great version of Demogoblin. Now, if you're not familiar with Demogoblin, he's a character who was around in the 90s for a little while. Then he died, and he only recently came back. Although he's recently come back as a girl character, and he is now called Demogoblin. But yeah, who knows? Maybe we'll get a figure of Demogoblin in the near future. But for now, let's just focus on Demogoblin. So, when the original Hobgoblin was killed, the supervillain Jack-O-Lantern took over as the Hobgoblin, but he was always kind of living in the original shadow, and he wanted to become more powerful and more respected. He ended up making a deal with a demon to give him more power, but the demon kind of tricked him. He made him more powerful, but he also kind of merged him with a demon, and the guy actually started transforming into an actual goblin. So when he pulled his mask off, he still had a forked tongue and, yellow eyes, and he started to go kind of slowly insane. So Hobgoblin's look started to change over time from kind of a nice clean cut costume to kind of a tattered costume, and he started getting that long tongue that would come out of kind of like a Venom style tongue. And eventually the Hobgoblin, whose name is Jason Massendale, he was trying to drive this demon from him. He wanted to undo the deal that he had done. And eventually that did happen. The Jason Massendale was separated from the demon, and the demon became its own character known as Demogoblin, and he took on the tattered look that Hobgoblin kind of had for the last little while before that. Hobgoblin kind of went back to being normal for a while, and Demogoblin was created. And yeah, he was a pretty cool character. He was kind of oddly like religious, always talking about killing sinners and stuff like that. And he was pretty nuts. And yeah, he had the glider of Hellfire, and yeah, he was similar in a lot of ways to the Green Goblin and the Hobgoblin, just a little bit nuttier. He was a lot like what the Hobgoblin had been while Jason Massendale was possessed. And then the storyline that kind of most featured Demogoblin was Maximum Carnage, in which case Demogoblin became one of Carnage's lackeys for that big story that was like 12 issues long, and they took over the city. And ultimately Demogoblin, in kind of a weird move, he died sacrificing himself to save a child when a building was collapsing, and he kind of grabbed the pillar, and yeah, the building fell on him. Which I don't know why they decided to redeem him at the last minute, but it kind of played into his sinners and innocence kind of vibe that he had taken on as the Demogoblin. And yeah, it was kind of sad to see him go, but I'm glad that now he has finally returned in another form, and I'm glad that we finally got this figure. Because I wanted to figure this guy when I was a kid, and they didn't make one. We had a Hobgoblin that was kind of tattered, but I used that as the Jason Massendale version. And what I used as a Demogoblin was this figure Toy Biz had produced called SpiderGoblin, which wasn't supposed to be this character. It was just kind of a weird mashup of Spider-Man with a like Hobgoblin character. But it kind of had a Demogoblin vibe, so that's what I used. Then there was a Demogoblin figure produced. I can't recall if it was by Toy Biz or Hasbro a few years back. And it's a pretty decent figure. I don't have that one because I wasn't collecting Marvel Legends at that time. But that one was quite a few years ago, and I think we were ready for an improvement. And this one I would say is improvement in every way. It's just got a great sculpt, great accessories. I love this face. Very cool. And yeah, I'm happy to have Demogoblin in my collection. So if you were on the fence about buying a couple of the figures in the wave, maybe you just wanted the Spider-Man, or maybe you just wanted the Vulture, you should really consider buying all the figures so you can put together the Demogoblin, because him, especially with his glider, it's a real highlight of this wave. And yeah, so there you go, Demogoblin. So that is my review of the SpiderMan Demogoblin Marvel Legends wave. So hope you enjoyed the video. Hope it was informative. If you liked the video, make sure to hit like below. Subscribe to the channel. And please leave me comments below too. So as always, thank you very much for watching. And I will see you next time.